And with that, I'll go ahead and pass things over to Dr. Tim Canty from the University of Maryland. Dr. Canty is an associate professor in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Science, and he is also the director of the University System of Maryland's Marine Estuarine Environmental Sciences graduate program. So he brings experience from NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab and UCLA, and he is our leading um, he is the leading person for our water level project here in Maryland. So I will go ahead and pass it over to him.
Thanks, Tina. Just share my screen. Look okay? Okay, great. So thanks everybody, and thanks for this opportunity to speak with you about our current effort. I'm representing a team of people, Mike Maddox, Ava Pushnig is going to talk in a little bit, and Katie Lehman, who I think is also online. So we have a small but very dedicated group on this project. There's my contact information if you want to reach out to me, and I'll post that again later. We're also part of the University of Maryland Climate Resilience Network, which we'll get into that in a minute. So, why are we focusing on the Chesapeake Bay? Obviously, it's environmental issues that it's dealing with, but sometimes it's not a good motivator for people. So I'm also a faculty fellow in our business school. So you can also make the economic argument that the Chesapeake Bay contributes about $100 billion annually to the Mid-Atlantic region. And it's faced growing threats from sea level rise, inundation, salinization of fresh water. There's a whole laundry list of issues here. And the picture I'm showing is Crisfield, Maryland. We were down there last Friday, in fact. This photo is from Tony Laird. I've often talked to, if people haven't been to Crisfield, I tell them, well, Crisfield isn't so much on the bay, but often in the bay. And if you look down here, you can see it's a nice sunny day. There's no exceptional weather event going on. It's just a high tide, probably a king tide, but you can see how far that water is moving in to the city. And obviously this is quite disruptive. We've talked to community members who tell us about driving to the grocery store and getting a phone call that they're going to have to walk back because they can't drive, the water level's too high. This was a picture we took last Friday, and pointer here. You can see water on the side of the road. This is the bridge entrance to the Crisfield Hospital. This was just a normal high tide, and you can see the water has taken away about a third of the road. There's also an adult care facility, I think, over there by the hospital as well. So you can imagine how disruptive and potentially dangerous these frequent flood events are. We learned last week they have about 3 or 4 days off of school each year because of flood. They have more flood days than snow days. So this is a pressing problem all across the region, but Crisfield is, in like other places, kind of a canary in the coal mine of what's going on. So as I mentioned, we're part of the Climate Resilience Network. This is a program funded under the University of Maryland Grand Challenges program, which was created by President Pines and Provost Jennifer King Rice. This was an institutional grant with matching funds from different colleges that brings together the Earth System Science Interdisciplinary Center, Atmospheric Oceanic Science, Geology, Geography, and the Marine Estuarine Environmental Sciences graduate program. So in a sense, a lot of the earth sciences here at the University of Maryland campus. With the focus of our particular group is scientists serving communities, getting out of our offices and labs and getting into the communities and trying to find ways that we can help. So this project was long in planning and kind of a sister project to the Maryland Mesonet, which is building weather stations all over the state. Some of us started talking about, well, what other monitoring could the state benefit from? And we started, obviously, flooding was a big risk, so we started looking to this. We're building the Maryland HydroNet, which is a network of low-cost water level sensors. We're using the Hohonu sensors, which are great. They're just plug and play and relatively low cost. we want to provide information to local emergency managers. We're not going to put out alerts or emergency warnings. That's the job of the people on the ground, but we want to provide them accurate, up-to-date information. We want to track long-term water level changes in the region and assist communities in planning and flood adaptation and mitigation strategies. Um, the questions we've been asked, is this needed if there are already tide gauges in the region? And this isn't driven by me as a scientist. Our community partners say, yeah, this is really important. The topography of the Chesapeake Bay is complex. And with changes in meteorology, this can lead to very localized flooding. And a couple of inches of difference in water could mean flooding or not. And what may impact one area 2 miles away from another could be very different. And so we need this kind of targeting of hotspots where the flooding is occurring. So we started with a pilot project in Annapolis and Charles counties. This is actually me getting to use power tools. I'm a modeler, so they don't let me out much. Phase one was kind of the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay. Phase two is moving into the eastern shore. And then phase three, we want to get further into the coastal bays and inland, but prioritizing high flood risk communities that lack really monitoring infrastructure. We have a cluster of sites in Annapolis, and this is where we started. And the reason is Annapolis faces significant flooding. There's complex terrain right there, and we thought this was a good place to start. The picture on the right is our first deployment sensor. This is near Cobb Island, which the bridge to the island gets flooded, and they need to know whether the community needs to know whether paramedics need to be stationed on the island before the flooding occurs, so people on the island have access to medical help if needed. And it's a picture of myself and Mike and some of our partners with Charles County who help facilitate deployment there. So going back to Annapolis, one thing we're trying to do is help support Annapolis in their efforts in tackling the flooding of the city dock region. And this happens quite frequently. If you go to Annapolis, on any high tide day, that downtown area, the docks where the statues are, is frequently flooded. We often think of hurricanes, but it could just be another weather event driving this. And I'll have an example in a little bit. But nonetheless, Annapolis is investing, almost $90 million in making the downtown city docks and helping the business there become more flood resilient. Right next door, Naval Academy is spending about $40 million to repair seawalls and take other steps to limit flooding. So you have, let's just say, $100 million to cover a few hundred yards of an 11,000-mile coastline for the Chesapeake Bay. If you stretch out the Chesapeake Bay and the rivers and everything, it's 11,000 miles. So this is a good start, but there's a lot more coastline that we need to be concerned about, in my opinion, at least. So the blue sites here are sites that have been deployed and currently operating. The yellow sites are notional areas where we want to deploy to. We have been, pun intended, inundated by requests from inland communities. Obviously, flooding this year has been a big topic of discussion all across the country, but also in our region. And it's not just coastal flooding. Inland areas are getting flooding, and we're trying to find ways that we can support these organizations as well. Vital to our success is creating partnerships with community stakeholders. I can't just go in and start drilling holes in docks and putting sensors up and people will be okay with that. When we first started this project, someone asked, well, where do you want to put the sensors? I said, well, that's not up to me. That's up to you guys. You tell me where you need them. And so we had an unveiling event in downtown Annapolis on June 5th a year ago. We had a lot of representatives from the state, our university presidents and deans were there to really kind of kick this off, what we're trying to do, get our efforts out there, and hopefully to build more partnerships across the region and to help find more partners. We do have now an annual in January stakeholder event. We'll be sending out information about that. Basically, just sit down and talk to the people and what do you need? How can we help you? These are some of our partners, not all of them, but it's when you go out to organizations and we say, hey, can we put some water level sensors? They're skeptical and they say, well, how much is it going to cost us? And I say, not going to cost you anything. It's going to cost us, but that's up to me to keep finding the funding. And with that approach, we've been welcomed all over the state, and this has been really rewarding for me, and I think for all the people in our group, because we really do want to get out there to help our partners and help our communities. We live here. You know, I live in Maryland, and these are restaurants I go to. These are communities I go to. I have a vested interest in protecting our communities. And so that, again, this isn't just a research project for someone to publish a paper and go to a conference and talk to all the other nerds about all the work we're doing. No, this is about getting into our communities. The science will come out of this. When we try to answer questions and how to help our communities, we can find where the limits of the science currently is, and then we go back to our science communities and say, hey, we're trying to help our communities, our cities, our counties, and we can't answer some of these questions. So we need more data, better data, data from the satellites, better models to answer these questions. We need more science. And so there's this nice feedback. It's challenging at times, but I'm air quality scientist and I work with the state. And so we find this all the time, opportunities to do science while also trying to address the needs of our communities and our neighborhoods. A case study on kind of the value I see of what we're trying to do here. This is downtown Annapolis. This is when the remains of Hurricane Debbie came through. So Hurricane Debbie hit down south in the Gulf, I believe, made its way up along the coast, well, inland. And what's interesting is a lot of hurricanes seem to be carrying more energy further inland, leading to flooding up in the Northeast in areas areas that do flood, but the amount of flooding we're seeing is a lot more than what we used to see, not just in Maryland, but all across the Northeast states. So this was when the remnants of Hurricane Debbie came through, and we did have a sensor installed. We did have our sensors installed here. So this is a map of winds. The greener the color, the faster the winds. If you can see this green dot here, this is Annapolis, and the winds here are coming from the southeast. This little spiral here to the southwest, that's the remains of Debbie. And this is as Debbie moved to the northeast. And you can see it's moved a little bit further north. The winds have shifted. Now they're coming from the southeast. And then as Debbie continued on its way, the winds shifted now to the southwest. So instead of coming from the bay, now across the land. So what was the impact in downtown Annapolis? Now the bottom panel here shows water level as measured by one of our sensors at the city dock, and we can see it got up to almost 4 feet, which is much higher than predicted. And during this time, when I was watching the monitors and watching water levels go up and up, and when you see that the low water level is almost higher than the previous high tide, you know you have to worry. And I was on campus at this time. We had numerous tornado warnings. In fact, campus was closed. I stayed here. But I was reaching out to some of our partners in Annapolis and Charles County. I said, are you guys keeping an eye on the water level sensors? Because this doesn't look good. And they said, oh yeah, we've been monitoring this. And you can see how high, a peak flood in the picture I showed you, what we're showing in that figure, this is what it actually looks like. So here's what real people are dealing with. Here's what the data looks like. Now, the black line up top is wind speed in miles per hour, and you can see as the water level was building up, winds were between 10 and 15 miles an hour, and the blue line is the wind direction. So it's coming from the east and southeast. When the storm passed further to the northeast, you can see the wind speed died down. And this is when the winds shifted now they're coming from the southwest. And then the water kind of sloshed back in the bay. Now I have a close colleague from the business school, lives in Dorchester County on the eastern shore. And I contacted him. I said, Cliff, are you guys flooded out? He said, no, we're really high and dry out here. So this was a completely wind-driven event. Getting the water level data is great, but putting into context requires these other complementary observations like wind speed, wind direction, rainfall rate, rainfall amounts. So is this a weather-driven event? Is this a tidal event? If it's a weather-driven event, is it a severe storm like a hurricane? And we see there's flood warnings in the bay, especially down in Crisfield because of Hurricane Erin coming through. Is this a nor'easter that's coming through? Is this an upstream event and the water's flowing into the bay? So this is great data that we didn't have before, and we're always looking for complementary data to help explain what's going on. Another issue with flooding is our infrastructure, obviously, and bridges are a big thing, obviously, in Maryland. And when I first started talking about this and delving into this subject, we're talking about infrastructure, roads getting flooded out, bridges getting flooded out. And I started talking to a couple folks from the Coast Guard, and they said, well, yeah, this is all important. This is the Bay Bridge. They said, yes, it's important, obviously, to be able to get over the bridges, but if you're on a boat, you want to get under the bridges. And what do you do when the water level's going up? And this was one of these, I never thought of this. This just wasn't on my radar, so to speak. Water levels rising, that gap between the top of the water and the bottom of the bridge is shrinking. So how do you get under the bridges? This is the Bay Bridge. There's a lot of clearance here, but these container vessels, cruise ships are large. They're getting bigger. And if you have less clearance, it's potentially harder to get under these bridges. Now, these are the large bridges, but as we know in Maryland, our bridges don't float. And so if ground is subsiding, water levels going up, is it going to be harder to get under the bridges? And what about the smaller bridges, the local bridges to get to a marina, or some people park in their yards? What about all that infrastructure? What's it going to cost to raise all our bridges? How do you prioritize? Also, as land subsiding, water's going up. What about getting into the Port of Baltimore? So container vessels are large, bridge clearance is shrinking, ports are going underwater. I've been to ports conferences before, and this is a global issue that people are talking about. So if you're going to relocate our ports, where do you relocate them to? Who do you move out of the way? What about train bridges, foot bridges, bike bridges? Again, small bridges in smaller communities, if they're not a swing bridge or a drawbridge, will you have to unmast or red light, green light? Like, oh, we need to get back to our home slip by this time because otherwise we're going to have to wait till low tide again. And this is a discussion I never thought of. And it just really made this even more important to me because think of the costs of rebuilding all of our bridge infrastructure, and who's going to pay for that. So looking forward, this is another one of our sensors here. We're obviously looking to expand. We have a laundry list of sites we need to start putting up and working with our communities. Some things we're planning on and we're testing right now is automated notifications. Again, we're not going to put alerts out, but we want to give people the ability to sign up on a web page, tell us for whatever monitor, let's say it's Crisfield, when it reaches 1 or 1.5 feet above normal, or 1.5 feet just in general, it will send, we'll set up a system that will send that person a text saying, hey, we've hit that threshold. Do what you want with that, but be warned. And so this is to give emergency managers, at least in community members, the ability, the ownership of this data, as opposed to having to drive around or wait for someone to call. The sensors will let them know. We want to ensure that the information is available and actionable, and Ava's going to talk in a second about this. We want to build some inundation modeling to not just we just don't want to have data, but ingest this data into data assimilation models, combine it with regional climate models to really in high resolution inundation models that really have very high resolution topography to understand how local terrain, how local conditions will lead to flooding. So can we come up with threshold scenarios? Could we develop a web page where someone could type in a location, other data like soil moisture that's measured by the Mesonet, rainfall rates, current water levels, and to say, okay, based on this information and forecasted rainfall rates or forecasted wind speed, wind direction, we would say your risks have increased as X%. Take that information and do what you need to do with it. Deploy swift water rescue resources, close roads, get people out of certain low-lying areas. Take the actions you need to take. We want to work with partners to find the resources to add other observations that are really relevant here. How much oxygen is in the water, the acidity of the water, the clarity of the water, temperature, water color. All of these things measure the health of the water, which has an economic impact on our communities and the health of our communities as well. Nitrogen, I'm an air quality scientist. What goes on in the water impacts the air. We know this for a fact. So we need to know, as we joke about surf turf above the earth, everything, what's going on, how that's impacting the environment, and the cascade effects on our communities and our economy. Land is sinking, so we want to measure that as well, and weather. So this holistic view, which we're calling right now the Maryland EnviroNet. We want this just kind of full-scale data of all aspects of the environment because they're all pieces of the same puzzle. And so let's get this full picture of what's going on as best we can to get that information to the decision makers, to the emergency managers, to find out, to let them figure out how to allocate limited resources or how we can help find other resources. Like with watercolor, in fact, NASA just launched a new satellite called PACE that measures watercolor from space. Watercolor can be an indication of biological activity. Could we help provide ground information that could help with the satellite retrievals? I was at NASA for many years. I've been funded through NASA for a while. So even though with budget cuts that are going on, there's still science that we can work on. But other impacts of flooding that we're focusing on physical here, but talking about biological. So you have a flood event in Crisfield and that water flows in and then water flows back out again. But now you have standing water everywhere. And Mike Maddox is working with 2 summer students and they did a study. They measured the water quality of some of these puddles, and birds poop in it, dogs poop in it, and I mean, it's gross, but now you get fecal bacteria in these puddles of water. You get mosquitoes in there. So there's potential health problems right there. But the next flood event comes in, floods, and all that stuff flows back out into the water. And now you're potentially risking the fisheries. So again, we focus on the primary impacts, the physical impacts of flooding, but there's always this cascade effect. Or if schools are closed, now does someone have to stay home from work because their children have to stay home? And so, it'd be great to do this kind of full front end to back end economic analysis of some of these events, or the risks to, say, community hospitals or community hotels, that sort of thing. The full impact of flood events in our changing environment. That's the target we're aiming at. Lofty, I know, I'm not naive about these things, but I think that's where we should be headed. And I think states in the Northeast, I think there's an opportunity. I was looking for opportunities where Northeast states could create, because we have these common problems, to create kind of a consortium of Northeast states to really focus on and share resources and knowledge. Just in the state of Maryland alone, we have resources in terms of environmental sciences that rival many countries. I'm not lying about this. And let's use these resources to build kind of regional leadership, working with organizations like MARACOOS and other acronym agencies on the air side of things. I think we have a lot of structures here. It's not like we have to build this from scratch. And I'm getting on my soapbox here, so I'll stop. But I really think we have an opportunity to build these very powerful consortia that can really address these issues that we're facing. If you're interested in learning more about the HydroNet or partnering with us, please reach out. We would love to work with you. Just here's my contact information. Call me, stop by anytime. I'm got coffee over here and hang out. We don't know what the problems are until people reach out to us. So we need our community partners. We are not charging folks for this. Maybe there'll come a day where we have to try to find other resources, but right now the whole focus is just getting into the communities and finding ways that we can help them based on what they tell us. We're not elbowing our way in saying we're going to solve all your problems. We're here to listen. What are the problems you're dealing with? How can we help? what resources do we have available to help? So please, please, please let us know. Very least, we'll put you on our mailing list. Maybe you can come join us for our stakeholder program. I said we'll be having in January. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there and then pass it along to